I moved to Briarwood Ridge for the peace. After years of city chaos and job burnout, I finally found a modest ranch-style home at the edge of a quiet suburban development. The place had charm rolling hills, backyard space, and best of all, my Jeep. That old Liberty was more than a car. It had seen every deployment, every storm, and every back road. It was muddy, loud, and unapologetically mine. The neighbors mostly kept to themselves, waving politely but rarely talking beyond weather. All except for one Dolores Martell, the newly appointed president of the Briarwood Ridge Homeowners Association. She was tall, sharply dressed, and spoke in clipped, polished sentences that made everything sound like a warning. From the day I moved in, she watched me like a hawk from her window across the cul-de-sac. When I parked the Jeep out front, she was there within minutes, clipboard in hand, issuing a friendly reminder that vehicles should be kept visually presentable and aligned with community aesthetics. I brushed it off, figured she was just passionate about lawn care and hedges. But Dolores wasn't just zealous. She was obsessed. The first fine came a week later. Unapproved vehicle noise, she said, referring to my engine revving at 6 p.m. after work. Then came the improper parking angle violation, followed closely by mud transfer to pavement. I laughed at first. My Jeep had a sheriff department logo on the spare tire left over from a rescue job I did a few years back, and I figured it might throw her off. But instead, it seemed to enrage her further. Each fine grew more personal. At one point, she even cited me for unpatriotic vehicle accessories, whatever the hell that meant. I tried to be neighborly, cleaned the Jeep, parked it inside the gate, even trimmed my lawn like she asked. But Dolores wasn't after compliance, she was after control. And when I didn't brake, she escalated. One night, around 11, I was in the garage tinkering with my Jeep's radio mount when I heard tires crunch in my driveway. I looked through the window. A tow truck was backing up toward my gate. I rushed out in my slippers, waving my arms. The driver looked uncomfortable. HO work order, he said. Says it's abandoned. Abandoned, I snapped. I just drove it 2 hours ago, behind the tow truck. Dolores stood beside her car, phone pressed to her ear, whispering into the night. He's aggressive. I heard her say, he's threatening the driver. I need officers dispatched to 312 Maple Bend. I froze. I didn't say a word to the driver. Just stood there, between the Jeep and the truck, like a statue. I saw my daughter's light turn on upstairs. She was visiting for the week, and the thought of her seeing me in cuffs turned my stomach. The truck eventually backed off. The cops came and left. No charges. But the look in Dolores's eyes told me she was just getting started. 2 days later, I found a GPS tracker magnetized under my bumper. My blood ran cold. That wasn't HOA business anymore. That was surveillance. That was illegal. I stood there in the driveway, clutching the tracker like evidence in a courtroom. My jaw clenched. Dolores had crossed a line she couldn't uncross. I wasn't going to sit quietly and let her chip away at my life. So I showed up at the next HOA meeting with the tracker, my voice steady. I found this under my vehicle. I said, holding it up, and I'd like to know who authorized this level of harassment. Dolores didn't even blink. Anyone can buy a tracker. She shrugged. Maybe you planted it yourself, Mr. Collins, to gain sympathy after multiple fines. That was the moment my grandfather, who'd been staying with me after hip surgery, walked in with his cane and a familiar swagger. He wore his old sheriff's badge on a chain around his neck, not official anymore, but it carried weight. The room went silent. Dolores's jaw clenched. "Afternoon, Dolores," he said, "still issuing parking tickets like your judge and jury." She didn't respond, just turned red and flipped to the next item on the agenda. That night, I called in every favor: old friends, court records. My buddy Greg from the county office pulled Dolores's public business filings. Turned out Briarwood Ridge wasn't her first neighborhood reign. 3 years ago, she ran a property management company that folded under fraud allegations. Multiple tenants filed complaints for fabricated fees and unjust evictions. She'd reinvented herself in Briarwood Ridge, hiding behind the title of HOA President like armor. Sarah Bennett, one of the only neighbors who ever smiled at me, joined in the research. She discovered that thousands of HOA dollars were being rerouted to a company called DLM Solutions, Dolores's initials. And the kicker, the vendor addresses matched properties from her defunct business. We gathered everything: emails, payments, screenshots, enough to make her sweat. The HOA's annual picnic was the big event, Dolores's throne room. She banned me, of course, citing escalating hostility and disruptive behavior. But my grandfather wasn't banned. Neither was Sarah. They wired me up with a mic and slipped into the event, passing out documents to key neighbors. Grandpa played the forgetful old man bit perfectly. "Say, where's that young fellow with the Jeep, Ethan? Always helped folks, didn't he?" Then, "Oops," he said loudly as a recording of Dolores played through his phone, her voice threatening to ruin me, calling my daughter a liability. Gasps, whispers. And then I stepped out from behind the pavilion with a folder of receipts and copies of the tracker order she'd placed through her sister's Amazon account. "Call the cops," she shrieked. "He's trespassing." But nobody moved. Officer Ramirez, a local cop, an old friend of my grandfather, stood from the crowd and said, "Actually, I'd like to see that paperwork." Neighbors surrounded us. One by one, they spoke up. Mrs. Pearson said she was fined $500 for unauthorized hydrangeas. Mr. Kim got cited for excessive hammock sway. Dolores started backing up, denying everything, forged all of it. This is a conspiracy. But her own voice from the recordings kept playing. That night, as she was escorted away for questioning, my daughter ran up and hugged me. "Is she gone, Daddy?" she asked. I looked at her, then at my Jeep, then at the neighbors who were now laughing together around lawn chairs. "Yeah, baby, she's done." The next morning, I sipped coffee on my porch, my Jeep gleaming in the sun. Liberty 22 plate catching the light like a badge of honor. My grandfather walked out with a grin, holding a newspaper that said, "HOA President under investigation for fraud and stalking." I smiled. The battle for Briarwood Ridge wasn't just about one Jeep. It was about standing up when no one else would. And this time, we'd won.